Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the White House, the most famous house in America, was nothing but a pile of smoking ruins. No president, no grand rooms, no iconic symbol of American power, just ashes. It sounds impossible today, but over 200 years ago, that's exactly what happened. In one of the most shocking moments in American history, foreign soldiers marched into Washington, D.C., entered the White House, and set it on fire. But why did they do it? How did the United States allow its capital to be attacked? And perhaps most surprisingly, what happened inside the White House just moments before the flames began? The answers reveal a story of war, revenge, and one of the greatest national humiliations America has ever experienced. To understand why the White House was burned down, we need to travel back to the early 1800s. The United States was still a young nation, barely 30 decades removed from the American Revolution. Across the Atlantic, Britain was locked in a massive struggle against Napoleon's France. As the British Empire fought for survival in Europe, tensions with America were quietly growing. British warships frequently stopped American vessels, seized cargo, and even forced American sailors into British service. Americans were furious. Many believed Britain still treated the United States like a rebellious colony instead of an independent nation. In June 1812, President James Madison asked Congress to declare war against Britain. The conflict became known as the War of 1812. Many Americans thought the war would be quick and easy. Some politicians even predicted that Canada could be conquered in a matter of weeks. Reality turned out to be very different. American invasions of Canada repeatedly failed, and the war dragged on longer than anyone expected. As the fighting intensified, both sides looked for ways to hurt each other. Then came an event that would have enormous consequences. In 1813, American forces captured York, the capital of Upper Canada, which is now Toronto. During the occupation, government buildings were looted and burned. To British leaders, this was not just military action, it was an insult. The destruction of York planted the seeds for a devastating act of revenge. By 1814, the situation had changed dramatically. Napoleon had been defeated in Europe, allowing Britain to send experienced troops across the Atlantic. Suddenly, the United States faced a far more powerful enemy. British commanders began planning a bold strike against the American capital itself. Their goal wasn't to conquer the country. Instead, they wanted to send a message so powerful that Americans would never forget it. In August 1814, thousands of British soldiers landed in Maryland and began marching toward Washington. American leaders knew they were coming, but preparations were chaotic. The U.S. military was poorly organized, and many officials underestimated the threat. President Madison personally rode out to observe the defenses, becoming the first and only sitting U.S. president to command troops in the field during wartime. The decisive battle took place at Bladensburg, just outside Washington. What happened next became so embarrassing that it earned a humiliating nickname, the Bladensburg Races. American troops quickly broke ranks and fled. British soldiers advanced with surprising ease. The road to Washington was now wide open. Back in the White House, First Lady Dolley Madison faced a terrifying situation. As British forces approached, she refused to leave immediately. Instead, she remained long enough to save valuable government documents and one priceless treasure, a famous portrait of George Washington. Workers reportedly cut the painting from its frame so it could be evacuated before the British arrived. Only after ensuring these items were safe did Dolley Madison finally leave the city. That evening, British troops entered Washington, D.C. They encountered little resistance. The city was nearly deserted. Their target list included major government buildings that symbolized American power. Soon, soldiers reached the White House. According to historical accounts, British officers found a dinner table prepared for President Madison and his guests. The president had already fled, but the meal remained. The officers reportedly sat down and ate some of the food before carrying out their mission. Then they began destroying furniture, curtains, and other contents of the building. Finally, they set the White House ablaze. Flames erupted through the rooms and climbed into the night sky. The fire spread rapidly, consuming much of the interior. Witnesses reported seeing an enormous glow visible from miles away. The White House was not the only building attacked. The British also burned the Capitol, the Treasury, and several other government structures. In a single night, the heart of the American government was left in ruins. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The very next day, a powerful storm swept through Washington. Some accounts describe it as a violent thunderstorm, but others suggest it may have included a tornado. The storm caused additional destruction across the city, but it also helped extinguish many of the fires. Nature itself seemed to intervene. Buildings that might have been completely destroyed were partially saved by the sudden downpour. For Americans, the attack was a national shock. Newspapers spread the news across the country. Many citizens were outraged and humiliated. How could the Capitol have fallen so easily? How could British troops burn the White House? Yet the British victory did not end the war. In fact, it strengthened Americans' determination to continue fighting. Meanwhile, British commanders had achieved their main objective. They had demonstrated that the United States was vulnerable. However, they had no intention of occupying Washington permanently. After completing their mission, British forces withdrew. The war continued for several more months. Then, in December 1814, negotiators signed the Treaty of Ghent, officially ending the conflict. Interestingly, one of the war's most famous battles, the Battle of New Orleans, occurred after the treaty had already been signed because news traveled slowly across the Atlantic. When peace returned, Americans faced a difficult task, rebuilding their capital. The White House was heavily damaged but not completely destroyed. Reconstruction began almost immediately. Workers repaired walls, rebuilt interiors, and restored the structure. The building's white-painted exterior helped cover smoke damage, leading many people to associate the name White House with the rebuilding period, although the building had been painted white long before the fire. Over time, the burned White House became something more than just a damaged building. It became a symbol of resilience. The United States had suffered a humiliating blow, but the nation survived. The government continued functioning, the Capitol was rebuilt, and the White House rose again from the ashes. Today, millions of tourists visit the White House every year. Most have no idea that the famous building standing before them is, in a sense, a survivor. Behind its walls lies the memory of a night when enemy soldiers walked its halls, ate at its tables, and set it on fire. So why was the White House burned down? The simple answer is revenge during the War of 1812. But the deeper answer is that it was the result of growing tensions, military mistakes, and a young nation's struggle to prove itself on the world stage. What began as a dispute between two countries ended with one of the most dramatic attacks ever carried out on American soil. And perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is this: the White House that stands today exists because Americans refused to let that fire be the end of the story.